With most San Jose single-family homes over 1.5 million, many home buyers are looking at condominiums and townhomes. But when you do that, you're buying into an HOA, which is a large corporation managing your property. So there's really things you need to know. Stay tuned as we discuss HOAs and the regulations and things you must know when you're buying a property. Hi, I'm Theresa Wellman with HomeownerExperience.com. Today we are talking about HOAs and the regulations and really important factors you should know when you're buying a condo or townhome. So first off, what are HOAs and why are they put in place? Well, an HOA is a Homeowners Association, which is basically a corporation that is put in place to maintain the value of your property common areas. So their job is to maintain, preserve, repair, replace anything in the common area. The other job is also to put into rules into place to make sure that the homeowners have enjoyment of the property. So those two factors are really important to understanding when you're looking at buying a property in a homeowners association. But there are also other rules and regulations that must be followed according to the Davis-Sterling Act. So we're going to get into that, but I definitely recommend you check out davis.sterling.com to get more information about the materials that regulate these common interest development properties. Okay, so there are two common types of properties. One I'm standing in right now, a condominium development. Basically, in a condominium, you only own the airspace, so the walls and inside. You don't own the structure of the building, obviously not the common area, and not any of the land underneath you. The other one that's really common is a planned unit development. Now, you will find single family homes in a planned unit development because they have a common area such as a pool or tennis courts or common space clubhouse. You also will find townhomes in such as that, and even sometimes a condominium type property, but it's owned as a planned unit development. So it's really important to understand the differences and how you tell that. But basically, you're going to go to the preliminary title report, and your real estate agent can help you out with that to understand which one you're buying into. Banks really care, and there's a big difference. I just quickly want to mention there's also two lesser known common interest development properties. One is a stock cooperative, and the other is a community apartment development. We're not going to go into those today. Now I'm standing in a planned unit development. I don't know if you can tell the difference by looking at the outside, but in a planned unit development, you actually own the land underneath you and you own the walls and the structure of your building. Some planned unit developments maintain the exterior of the building and some don't. These are things you need to know. Who controls termite? Who maintains termite, who doesn't. These are all things that will be in the CC&Rs and dictate who has responsibility for each of these items, maintenance and repair. Stay tuned because there is one number you need to know from the HOA disclosures to help you understand whether the financials are great for the HOA or not and what kind of risk you might be taking. So did you know there are 55,000 associations in California? So this is a really common thing that we need to understand. I find a lot of home buyers really don't know the difference between a condominium and a planned unit development, as well as they don't know the questions to ask. And there are some really important things you should know when you go in because you want to make sure that your property is maintained. It's not going to cost you lots of extra money and that you are willing to abide by the rules and regulations. So who runs an HOA and what are the details you really need to know? Well, first, a board of directors runs the HOA, and that is spelled out in the bylaws of the Homeowners Association. So you really need to see those bylaws and understand how they elect their board of directors and what the election process is. Now, there's a lot of regulations as to what documents must be shared when you're selling a property in a common interest development. And like I mentioned before, that is controlled by the Davis-Sterling Act. In California, the rules started to be put in place in 1963, but over the years, the Davis-Sterling Act was passed and has been revised, and the latest version of 2014 talks about some of the regulations that need to be dealt with and disclosed to a buyer. So besides the bylaws, you need to see articles of corporation, a budget, because you want to know financially how the HOA is doing. Of course, the rules and regulations, or CC&Rs. Some HOAs have both, some just have the CC&Rs. So these are some of the important documents. Other ones are going to be the HOA budget, a reserve study, and how they maintain common areas and whose responsibility is it for structural items. And then of course, 12 months of meeting minutes is going to give you some insight into what's going on with the HOA and the community. These are all really important factors to dig into. So after you've gotten the full disclosure package with all of the required items from the Davis-Sterling Act, there are questions that you need to ask. There's information you need to dig into. It is the seller's responsibility to make sure that they are fully disclosing and abiding by the law, but my experience tells you they don't always have a complete package, so make sure you're checking with your agent. Secondly, is the property under any litigation? This is going to be really important to know if you're financing the property with a bank. Another thing to look at is, like I mentioned earlier, who maintains what? Who's doing the termite? What happens if something breaks in a wall, like plumbing? Who maintains the main plumbing line? Those are all critical things to know, and there's going to be big differences between other planned unit developments from one another, or of course from a condominium association. And what rules do you need to follow? Are you okay with them? There's probably pet restrictions. There might be occupant restrictions as to how many people you can have in your unit, and parking restrictions. All of these things are very important for you to know. Rental restrictions, because it might affect your goals and use of the property, and you want to make sure you understand what those are and you're okay with them before proceeding. So one way to take time and review these is to have a common interest development contingency to make sure you have time to dig into all of these materials thoroughly. And the biggest thing that I mentioned, you must know, the one number of course is going to be, is the HOA financially solid? So you're going to look at the reserve study, how many units there are and what the actual funds or budget is for the property. And there, lots of times in the reserve study, can be an outstanding shortage per door in the association. That is the number I want you to find to really get an idea of any upcoming potential special assessments or shortages with the maintenance of the property. This is really critical as a buyer, because if you're coming into the property not knowing that in maybe 20 months or a couple years, 3 years, they're going to have to replace all the roofs and they don't have the funds for that, you might all of a sudden have a special assessment for $15,000. Wouldn't it be good to know that up front so you can plan for it or negotiate with the seller? Of course it would. That's really important. Now, I know all this information seems very overwhelming, but what I do recommend is there is a service for an HOA inspection, if you will, a company who will review all the HOA documents, make sure it's complete, provide some summaries for you so that you thoroughly understand and you are not overwhelmed by the 500, 200, 700 pages of the HOA documents that are provided to you. This company is experts in reviewing the HOAs and can provide all the information that you need to know and make sure you have a full package. I highly recommend them. It's like a inspection, a property inspection, but it's an HOA review, and it's a great way to spend your money to make sure you're ensuring everything is disclosed and you understand the risk when buying into a common interest development. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment below with questions.